November 22nd, 1942. The Berghof, Berchtesgaden, Bavaria. The telegram arrived at 14:30 hours. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring read it standing in the corridor of his luxury train, Asia, which sat on a siding near Munich. Hitler wanted him at the Berghof immediately. The Sixth Army was encircled at Stalingrad. The Führer needed an answer about aerial resupply. Göring folded the telegram and handed it to his adjutant. He did not ask questions. He did not telephone his field commanders in Russia. He ordered the train to Bavaria. The drive up the mountain took 40 minutes. Göring sat in the back of the Mercedes watching alpine villages pass through afternoon light. He wore his powder blue Reichsmarschall uniform with gold braid and medals. The uniform had been tailored 3 times in the past year. His weight had increased again. Morphine addiction and what he called his glandular condition had added flesh to his frame until even movement required effort. He had not been to the Eastern Front in 6 months. His subordinates submitted reports. He signed orders. The daily reality of Luftwaffe operations in Russia existed for him as columns of numbers and documents he rarely finished reading. 3 days earlier, Soviet forces had closed the ring around Stalingrad. 250,000 German soldiers now sat in a pocket 37 miles wide. They needed food, ammunition, fuel, medical supplies. The numbers that mattered were simple. The trapped army required 750 tons of supplies daily to maintain combat capability. For defensive operations only, perhaps 300 tons might suffice. Göring knew these numbers existed somewhere in the reports his staff had prepared. He had not read them. The Berghof appeared through pine trees. Security personnel opened gates. The Mercedes climbed the final approach and stopped at the entrance. Göring stepped out. His knees protested. He straightened his tunic and walked inside. Hitler stood in the great hall, studying maps spread across the conference table. Chief of the Army General Staff Kurt Zeitzler was present. So was Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel and Colonel General Alfred Jodl. The men looked up as Göring entered. The Führer did not waste time on greeting. He pointed at the map showing the Stalingrad pocket. The Sixth Army is cut off. Zeitzler wants them to break out. I have forbidden it. The army will hold Stalingrad. The question is supply. Can a Luftwaffe maintain them by air? The question landed in the room like an artillery shell. Göring felt the eyes of the other men turn toward him. Zeitzler's expression carried skepticism. Jodl and Keitel maintained careful neutrality. Göring's mind moved through calculations he had not made and facts he did not possess. The Demainsk pocket. Yes. The Luftwaffe had supplied 100,000 men at Demainsk through the winter of 1941 to 42. Difficult conditions, heavy losses, but they had done it. Demainsk proved that large-scale aerial resupply was possible. Stalingrad was different. Göring knew this in some distant part of his awareness that he immediately suppressed. Different scale, different distances, different enemy strength. The Soviet Air Force had been weak at Demainsk. Intelligence indicated the VVS was stronger now. Better aircraft, better tactics, better organization. But Hitler was waiting for an answer. Hitler, who had criticized Göring increasingly over the past year. Hitler, who had blamed him personally for the Luftwaffe's failure to prevent RAF bombing of German cities. Hitler, who had questioned whether the Reichsmarshal still possessed the will to fight. This was Göring's opportunity to restore himself in the Führer's estimation, to prove that the Luftwaffe remained capable, to demonstrate that loyalty and faith could overcome material calculations. The thing appears feasible, Göring said. Hitler's expression shifted. Relief mixed with something harder. He walked around the table and stood directly in front of Göring. Listen here, Göring. If the Luftwaffe cannot carry this through, then the Sixth Army is lost. The Führer's voice was quiet and absolute. You understand what I am asking? Yes, my Führer. You personally guarantee that your aircraft can deliver 300 tons daily to the pocket? Göring felt the weight of the moment. He had not consulted his transport commanders. He had not asked Wolfram von Richthofen, who commanded Luftwaffe in the south. He had not spoken with General Martin Fiebig, whose 8 Air Corps would execute the actual airlift. He had not reviewed aircraft availability or weather forecasts or enemy fighter strength. He knew what Hitler wanted to hear. He knew what would restore his standing. He knew that doubt would be interpreted as weakness and weakness as betrayal. I guarantee it, Göring said. The decision was made. Hitler nodded and returned to his maps. The meeting continued with discussions of defensive perimeters and relief operations. Göring participated with confidence. He had manufactured from nothing but will and desperation to please. The meeting ended at 1800 hours. Göring returned to his train. He ordered his staff to notify Luftwaffe commands that aerial resupply of Stalingrad would commence immediately. He did not ask for detailed operational plans. He did not question whether his guarantee was achievable. He had given his word to Hitler. The Luftwaffe would find a way. That evening, Göring sat in his private carriage as the train departed Bavaria for Berlin. He reviewed acquisition lists for art pieces he planned to purchase in Paris. Tomorrow he would travel to France. There were paintings to examine, sculptures to acquire. The business of managing the airlift could be delegated to subordinates. In Russia, 260 kilometers west of Stalingrad, ground crews at Tatsinskaya airfield received orders to prepare for maximum flight operations. The Junkers Ju-52 transport aircraft stationed there numbered fewer than 200. Each Ju-52 could carry approximately 2.5 tons of cargo. To deliver 300 tons daily would require 120 aircraft completing successful round trips each day. The mathematics were brutal. Tatsinskaya to Stalingrad measured 240 kilometers. Flight time in good conditions, 75 minutes each way. Turnaround time for unloading, refueling, and loading, 3.5 hours minimum. Total cycle time, approximately 6 hours. In theory, each aircraft could complete 4 missions per day. But winter conditions on the Eastern Front were never good. Blizzards grounded aircraft for days. Temperatures dropped below -30°C, freezing engines and hydraulic systems. Visibility disappeared in snow and fog. The Soviet Air Force flew constant combat air patrols over the pocket. Major General Martin Fiebig, who commanded 8 Air Corps, had tried to communicate these realities to higher headquarters. His reports detailed the shortage of transport aircraft, the deteriorating weather, the growing strength of Soviet fighters. The reports went to Luftwaffe command. From there, they should have reached Göring's headquarters in Berlin. Whether they reached Göring's desk was unclear. Whether anyone read them to him was uncertain. What was certain was that Göring had made his promise without knowing these details. He had guaranteed success based on faith rather than capability. November 24th. The airlift began. 22 Ju-52 aircraft reached Stalingrad. They delivered 65 tons of supplies. The Sixth Army needed 300 tons. The first day produced less than 22% of the minimum requirement. Göring was in Paris. He spent the morning at the Jeu de Paume Museum examining confiscated art. His representatives were negotiating the purchase of Renaissance paintings from private French collectors. The work was delicate. It required personal attention and aesthetic judgment that only Göring possessed. November 25th, 30 Ju-52 aircraft reached the pocket. Soviet fighters intercepted the formations. 10 transports were shot down. The daily delivery totaled 82 tons. November 26th, 47 aircraft attempted the mission. 16 were destroyed by fighters and anti-aircraft fire. 24 reached Stalingrad. They delivered 71 tons. The pattern established itself immediately. The Luftwaffe could not deliver 300 tons. The average hovered around 90 tons per day. Some days reached 120 tons. Many days fell below 60 tons. The Sixth Army began consuming its reserves. Soldiers reduced rations. Ammunition stocks declined. Medical supplies ran short. In Paris, Göring completed his acquisitions and departed for Berlin. He arrived at his estate, Karen Hall, on November 27th. Waiting for him were urgent requests from Luftwaffe for additional aircraft, for better winter equipment, for a realistic assessment of what the airlift could actually achieve. Göring met with his staff on November 28th. He was informed that delivery rates were falling below requirements. He was told that aircraft losses were unsustainable. He was advised that field commanders doubted the airlift could succeed. The Reichsmarschall responded with anger. He accused his subordinates of defeatism. He insisted that the difficulties were temporary. He ordered them to increase effort and ignore obstacles. When questioned about specific aircraft numbers and maintenance requirements, he shouted that details were the responsibility of field commanders. November 29th. Göring traveled to Rassenburg in East Prussia for a conference at Hitler's Wolfschanz headquarters. He brought no updated information about the airlift. He had not personally spoken with Fiebig or Richthofen. He had not reviewed the daily delivery reports. He relied on optimism and authority. Hitler asked for a progress assessment. Göring reported that the operation was proceeding according to plan. Temporary difficulties with weather were being overcome. The Luftwaffe remained fully confident in its ability to supply the Sixth Army. General Zeitzler challenged this assessment. He had received reports from Sixth Army Command indicating severe supply shortages. He demanded to know actual daily tonnage delivered versus tonnage required. Göring did not have these numbers. He deflected with general statements about operational security and the unreliability of field reports during combat conditions. The meeting ended without resolution. Hitler accepted Göring's assurances. Zeitzler left the conference, convinced the airlift was failing but powerless to override the Reichsmarschall's guarantee. December arrived with temperatures dropping below -35°C. Aircraft engines froze on the ground. Crews worked in conditions that caused frostbite in minutes. The Soviet Air Force intensified combat air patrols. More German transports were destroyed. More crews were lost. At Stalingrad, soldiers began dying of starvation. The daily bread ration dropped to 200 grams per man. Horses were slaughtered for meat. Medical stations ran out of bandages and morphine. Combat capability degraded as units lost strength. The Sixth Army commander, General Friedrich Paulus, radioed repeated requests for increased supply deliveries. He specified exact requirements: 750 tons daily for the Army to maintain offensive capability, 300 tons minimum for defensive operations, Below 300 tons meant slow attrition and eventual collapse. These requests reached Göring's headquarters. His staff prepared summaries. Whether Göring read them remained unclear. His schedule showed meetings about industrial production, conferences about fighter aircraft development, inspections of aircraft factories. The daily crisis of Stalingrad did not appear to occupy his attention with proportionate urgency. December 12th, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein launched Operation Winter Storm, a relief offensive aimed at breaking through Soviet lines to reach Stalingrad. The plan required the Sixth Army to break out and link up with Manstein's forces. Hitler refused to authorize the breakout. The Sixth Army would hold its positions and await relief. For this strategy to work, the airlift had to sustain the army. Göring's guarantee had to be fulfilled. The Luftwaffe had to deliver 300 tons daily. The actual delivery rate in mid-December averaged 105 tons per day. On the best day of the entire airlift, 290 tons reached the pocket. That day was exceptional. Most days delivered between 60 and 120 tons. The mathematics of starvation were inexorable. December 16th, Manstein's offensive stalled 48 kilometers from Stalingrad. Soviet reinforcements blocked further advance. The relief operation failed. The Sixth Army remained trapped. The only lifeline was the airlift that Göring had promised would succeed. December 24th, Soviet forces overran Tatsinskaya airfield. Göring had forbidden evacuation of the base despite warnings that Soviet armor was approaching. When permission finally came, it was too late. 70 Ju-52 transports were destroyed on the ground or during panic takeoff attempts. The main airlift base was lost. Operations shifted to Morozovskaya airfield, further from Stalingrad. Flight times increased. Delivery tonnage decreased. The airlift was failing comprehensively. Göring received reports of the Tatsinskaya disaster. He blamed field commanders for poor defensive preparations. He did not acknowledge that his prohibition against evacuation had caused the losses. He did not revise his assessment that the airlift remained viable. January 1943. Soldiers in Stalingrad were dying at rates of thousands per day. Starvation, disease, cold, kumba. The Sixth Army was disintegrating. The airlift continued to deliver an average of 95 tons daily. The Army needed 300 tons minimum. The gap between promise and reality was killing an army. Field Marshal Milch, Göring's deputy, was finally dispatched to Russia to take direct control of the airlift. Milch was competent and energetic. He found chaos, inadequate aircraft, broken equipment, exhausted crews, impossible mission requirements. He did what he could, but the operational mathematics could not be overcome. There were not enough aircraft. There was not enough fuel. There was not enough time. January 31st. The southern pocket of the Sixth Army surrendered. February 2nd. The northern pocket surrendered. 91,000 German soldiers entered Soviet captivity. More than 150,000 had died in the pocket. The Stalingrad airlift had delivered approximately 8,350 tons total over 70 days. The Army had needed 21,000 tons minimum. The shortfall had killed an entire field army. Hermann Göring's guarantee had failed. His promise to Hitler had been worth nothing. His assurance that the Luftwaffe could deliver 300 tons daily had proven to be fantasy. But on November 22nd, 1942, standing in the Great Hall at the Berghof, Göring had believed he could deliver. He had believed that will and loyalty could overcome mathematics. He had believed that his word to Hitler was more important than consulting his commanders or reviewing operational details. He had believed that faith in German superiority would prevail over material limitations. He had believed wrong. 250,000 men paid for that belief with their lives. The Battle of Stalingrad marked the turning point of World War II on the Eastern Front. The destruction of his Sixth Army shattered the myth of German invincibility and began the long Soviet advance that would end in Berlin. Göring's failed promise demonstrated the catastrophic consequences of leadership divorced from operational reality. The Stalingrad airlift remains studied in military academies as an example of how senior commanders' unwillingness to challenge political authority with tactical truth can transform difficult situations into absolute disasters. If this story gave you insight into the decisions that shaped history, please consider subscribing. We tell the stories of real people making choices they believed were right, choices that changed the world in ways they never anticipated.